Welcome to the show. IB Nation Sports Talk is up and rolling on this Tuesday. Hope you're having a good one. We've got a little pop-up thunderstorm kind of rolling through the area right now where we are, but otherwise all is well. We have got a ton, and I mean a ton of stuff that we are going to get to on today's show. It's going to start with Carter Karels, old friend. He used to cover for a little bit, and he is now back home. He's from Texas, and he's been covering Texas A&M for the last couple of years. So we'll be talking to him. But first, the sea was angry that day, my friends. DJ's he's jousting right now in the chat. He says, I'm just going to put this out there. I'm appalled by the number of Notre Dame fans that think we lose this game. Get out your Shamrocks, put on your game day shirt, and let's get positive about this game. I mean, it's that time. It's game week, and you've got some of the naysayers who are kind of, popped in after taking an off season off, I guess, and even some of the naysayers who have been around for a while. I'm sure the sky is falling mostly because of Notre Dame's offensive line situation, but you'll hear from Carter Karels here in a second, and we did record this earlier this afternoon due to his busy schedule. Texas A&M has got plenty of questions of their own, and if you ask me, I think they have even more questions than Notre Dame. You're going to see a couple of really quality defenses out there on the field Saturday night, but I think Texas A&M personally has more questions going into this game. After Carter Karels, Jesse's going to be here. He's going to bring out the magic whiteboard, and we are going to he's going to draw some stuff up, both sides of the ball, how Mike Denbrock might attack that A&M defense and what Colin Klein's offense might look like for Texas A&M. So we've got all that coming up on the whiteboard. But first, we're going to do this. Carter Karels, our old friend, is with us to talk a little bit of Texas A&M. He covers the Aggies for Gigem247. It feels, Carter, like we've been talking about this game forever at this point. It's like high-profile season openers. I don't know about you, but around here, we're all just ready for this game to get going.
Oh, man, 100%. I mean, I looked at this game when I took this job February 23 because – not only do I cover A&M, but I used to cover Notre Dame. So I've been calling it my journalistic Super Bowl. So it's going to be cool to see all my old pals from Notre Dame. And, it's going to be fun.
Does Texas A&M, I don't think they have Florida State on the schedule anytime in the near future, another one of your stops over the last couple of years.
Yeah, no Florida State. They haven't met in any other sport that I can think of. But yeah, upcoming opponents are Notre Dame, and then I think after that it's Arizona State for a home and home. So no, unfortunately, no.
I'm sure you'll get to see Brian Kelly at some point down the road as well. So you've got that in your future, right?
Yep.
Well, let me just kind of start with this. We talked back, I guess, what's it been, like early summer, late spring, something like that. We talked a little bit about kind of where Texas A&M was coming out of spring practice and into the summer. What maybe was the biggest question that Mike Elko and the Aggies answered coming out of fall training camp?
Yeah, a couple things on the offensive side. I think Conner Weigman's health was kind of the question because in the spring, coming off of that, foot surgery, he wasn't himself. He wasn't 100%. He was still on the field practicing. Really did an admirable job just being out there, even though he couldn't quite plant that foot. And so that was kind of the big question. Will he be 100%? And I think he got 100% probably in May or June. So no problems there. Looked a lot more like himself in preseason camp. On the defensive side, I think maybe the question was, how much better is this secondary going to be? And a lot of new faces in the group, 10 newcomers, 7 of whom are transfers. And this group last season really struggled. And so, can this be a strength? Can it be at least not a weakness? And I think that they've had a lot of good competition in that group. I think if you ask them who would the starters be against Notre Dame, I think they may not even know the answer to that question yet. But from a depth perspective, there have been a lot of different guys pushed for the starting jobs there. Headlined by Bryce Anderson making the move from nickel to safety. I think he'll be the best player in that secondary. And at cornerback, you got guys like Will Lee, who started at Kansas State and has that experience. You got Des Ricks, who is a former 5-star recruit, transfer from Alabama. At nickel, you've got an experienced guy there in Tyreek Chappelle, who's making the move there from field cornerback. And so, I think last year really a struggle there. And I think this year, I don't think it's an elite group. I don't think it's full of all SEC guys, but it's not a glaring weakness. It's not going to be, a group that gets exposed a lot, especially with the defensive line helping them up front with the pass rush.
Sounds, at least, because I think that from up here with our perspective, since there are so many kind of unknowns, their secondary is probably the thing that that we've looked at where this is the potential weakness, especially with that defense. So it sounds like you're at least somewhat confident in their ability to be competent anyway, to not be as bad as they were last year.
Yeah, at least average, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the bar for this team is don't be getting burned constantly like you were last year when you played really good passing attacks. And, I think having what I think could very well be the best defensive line in the country is a big piece of that formula. I think it's going to make that group better. I think people were overselling or underselling just how big of a loss McKinley Jackson, Walter Nolan, and Edgerrin Cooper were in the sense of the stopping the run. I actually think we might see a little bit of a flip where this team was really good last year with stopping the run and that sort of thing, but they weren't good in the back end. This year, their coverage might be pretty decent, but stopping the run might have some issues. Replacing those 3 guys, up front, you're moving a smaller a guy in Shamar Turner, about 300 pounds, from defensive end to D tackle. Albert Regis projects to start. It'll be his first time as a full-time starter. And then replacing Edgerrin Cooper, a consensus All-American at linebacker last year. I still don't know if they know who will be their replacement there at weak side linebacker. So, I'm not going to say that they're going to be better at defending the pass than the run. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying so much of the focus on the secondary, and I think there also should be focus on, hey, up front in the middle and replacing Edgerrin Cooper. That will be a challenge too, I think, for this unit. But overall, tons of confidence with the defense. It all starts with that pass rush that they've got and adding a guy like Nick Scorton leading the Big Ten in sacks. And I think he's got a good chance to lead the SEC in sacks this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt, like when you look at defensive linemen who will be on the field Saturday night, Scorton is probably like the guy at the top of the list. And I'm talking about for both teams, like he's probably the best talent that's going to be on the field. And especially with everything that's happened with Notre Dame's offensive line, I think there's no doubt, like we're kind of looking at this like on both sides of the ball, like defensive line should be a strength for both teams. I am curious though to get like Notre Dame is going to go 10 or 11 deep, and in a game that like we were talking about the heat and all that kind of stuff before we started up this interview, and that's what I think people on both sides have been talking about. How deep is the Texas A&M defensive line? Like what's their ability to rotate? How deep do you expect that rotation to be in this game?
Very deep. Just to give you a sense, they've got a guy who led the MAC in sacks last year, Cassius Howell, and he's not even a starter for this team. And they've got 4 and 5 stars all across the defensive line who are not starters. Now, that doesn't mean that they're, living up to that potential of a 4 and 5 star, but they have those traits and they have those things that you don't normally see from backups and third teamers. They got a guy in the transfer portal, Rodas Johnson from Wisconsin, who I think will be a good contributor there at defensive tackle. You got a number of guys you could point to at defensive end. They've got the UCF transfer Josh Seliskar, who has some good experience. You got some guys who are entering their third year who were from that big 2022 class, like Malik Silla, who could get a little bit more time. I just think, DJ Hicks is another guy to mention. I think if he's not a starter, he could be a really solid backup for this team. Former 5-star recruit in the 23 class, got a lot of playing time as a true freshman last year. People thought he'd be the starter, but it sounds like Albert Regis has kind of beat him out there. But we'll see, obviously, when it comes to this Saturday. But, yeah, I think they've got the potential to go 10 or 11 deep, just like Notre Dame. And I think that, up front, you're always wanting to rotate on the defensive line, and they've got the flexibility to do it. What we've heard a lot is 3rd and long is going to be a down where you're going to see a lot of creativity from this front. You're going to see all different kinds of alignments and pressures. And, if we know anything about Mike Elko, it's that he likes to be creative on 3rd down. And
right.
I think that's the down to watch, where you could see a guy like Cassius Howell drop into coverage, or you could see 5 defensive linemen and you could see, a ton of talented pass rushers, coming for Riley Leonard. So defensive line, not a big worry as far as depth or talent and pass rush. It's just stopping the run that will be the challenge for them after replacing a few guys.
Yeah, and I think that, Notre Dame is looking at this, or at least some Notre Dame fans, like, is Notre Dame going to effectively be able to run the football, considering the newness, the inexperience, 6 combined starts on the offensive line. I think that there is a lot more concern than anyone probably would have been guessing even a month ago. But I'm curious, like your take, flip it to the other side of the ball from the Texas A&M perspective. What about A&M's offensive line? What is that a concern at all? Is it, especially going up against Notre Dame's defensive line with all the experience and again, depth that the Irish are going to be able to throw at them?
Yeah, it's funny. It feels like both teams have very similar strengths and weaknesses because, both feel very good about their defense. Both feel pretty good about their defensive line. It's the offense that has questions. The offensive line has questions. I think A&M feels fantastic about the left side of their offensive line. They got a 3-year starter at left tackle in Trey Zune. Really started to come into his own last year, and I think he could be a draft pick in 2025. Chase Basanis making the move from right guard to left guard, or right tackle to left guard. I think he's going to be the perfect fit there. He's somebody that's a freak in the weight room that, a couple of years from now, if he's a high draft pick, would not be surprised. So I think they feel great about their left side. It's the center and right tackle that's kind of got some questions. They had very poor center play last year in Bryce Foster, who went on to transfer to Kansas. And so that was the spot where they needed a new guy. And Mark Naboo was kind of the guy you thought would fill in that spot. Certainly had a little bit of experience playing there last year. But then they bring in a transfer from Utah. Going to butcher his name. Kolinu Feu is what I believe it is. And, had some experience at Utah, started the last 5 games of the season, but he only started because the starter got hurt. So he was the backup there. Is he good enough to start in the SEC? I don't know. I think Naboo is probably the better option there. However, it all kind of goes down to what A&M does at right tackle, because you thought that Reuben Fothery would be the surefire answer there. They kind of been moving it around, tinkering throughout preseason camp. Their projected starter at right guard, Armaj Reed Adams, a transfer from Kansas, he played right guard. He played right tackle. They kind of moved him around. And when he was at right tackle, they moved Naboo to right guard and had the Utah transfer at center. So kind of all depends what they do at right tackle. And I think that's why that side is more of a question for A&M, whereas the left side, it's cemented. You have two guys there who could be draft picks very soon, and two guys there that can really anchor that side of the defensive or the offensive line. So, yeah, really the right side for A&M.
So right side / in the middle, at least a little bit of questions. And again, like when you look at the matchup with Notre Dame, that's where Notre Dame has, a ton of experience with Howard Cross and Riley Mills and those kind of guys. So I'm just kind of talking this out loud for Notre Dame fans, to think about where some of these matchups are and stuff like that. And then, of course, on top of this is you've got Colin Klein coming in as offensive coordinator. I don't know, were you guys able to see much live stuff during camp? Like, what was that like? Like how much of his offense were you actually, kind of able to see in person? Get a feel for what it might look like, beyond just what you've seen from his Kansas State days, obviously.
Yeah, not a whole lot. I think the thing that people have been talking about, sort of the emphasis has been expanding the running game, having a lot of different ways to run the football, and being creative with that and making it just more of an emphasis overall. I think that's something that when you look at Colin Klein's, time at Kansas State, running the football was their bread and butter. It was one of the best rushing attacks in college football. Now, do they have the O-line and the running backs to do that? I don't know. They're certainly not as good as what Kansas State had the last couple of years. And then you also see him run the quarterback a lot at Kansas State with Will Howard and Avery Johnson. Well, at A&M, Conner Weigman, not really a run-first guy, but definitely mobile. So that's one of the aspects we haven't been able to see in practice since the quarterbacks aren't live. But if you look at him, he's gained a little bit of a weight, and you just kind of get the sense that A&M may run the quarterback a little this season, which, after all the injuries they had the last few years, some people might say, I don't know about that. But I think they think of, hey, if we can just add one extra element in the offense and while keeping this guy safe, why not do it? Because I think you look at this offense and there's not a ton of star power at the skill positions. Not a lot of proven guys. No one who's had a 1,000-yard receiving season. No one who's had a 1,000-yard rushing season. So I think that this is not going to be an offense that is highly explosive and throwing the ball all around the field and having 40-yard gain after 40-yard gain. I think you're going to see more of an offense that methodically moves the ball down the field, stays ahead of the chains and doesn't get into, third and long, has more of a third and manageable, tries to limit turnovers, tries to limit penalties, and just tries to be that efficient third down offense that has these long extended drives to give their defense a rest and kind of grind out these games. We saw Notre Dame kind of had a similar style a few years ago with Ian Book being the plus game manager for them. I think that might be the plan here. Maybe if you look back at some of the A&M teams in 2020 and 2021, that's kind of what they did. They weren't this explosive offense. They methodically drove it down the field, and then their defense took care of the rest, and the offense took care of the football. So I think that's going to be what you kind of see. Conner Weigman so far, he's only thrown 2 career interceptions through 8 starts versus 16 touchdowns. So he's somebody that's not careless with the football and can do that sort of offensive style. So I think that's what you'll probably see from them.
Well, and I guess, like he's someone who like feels like he's there. There's a lot. I realize he was a highly regarded recruit and all that kind of stuff, a 5-star recruit going down there. But, as you mentioned, he doesn't have a whole lot of game experience. The experience he has, the numbers have looked pretty good. Is the hype, I guess, around Weigman justified at this point, or in your mind, does he still kind of have something to prove? As like you talked about the injury, even beyond the injury, like is there more that he has to prove, especially in a kind of a high profile, high exposure game like he's going to play this Saturday night?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, right? Like, I think, is the hype warranted? I think it is, because when he has played, he's been very impressive, and he's, checked off all the boxes you want to see, and certainly has the pedigree as a 5-star recruit. And drafts are all about projections and projecting where you think a guy will be. So the thought is not, hey, today would he be drafted first in the first round? It's hey, after having a big season, he'd be drafted first. So I think it makes sense. At the same time, though, you're totally right. He does have to prove it. He's got to do it across a full season. As a true freshman, he didn't begin the season as the starter. I think that was probably a mistake on Jimbo Fisher's part. And I think, Conner Weigman won't admit that, but I think he probably thinks that he should have been the starter. And, they bring him in, and what does he do? He has an incredible game against Ole Miss, and he has an incredible game against LSU, and leads them to a top 5 win and Kyle Field, and spoiling LSU's playoff hopes. And then last year, before he went down with the injury, now didn't do very good against Auburn, but every other game he had to, look pretty good. And from a metric standpoint, from a PFF standpoint, he graded as one of the better quarterbacks in the country up to that point. The sample size is certainly the thing you could point to. Hey, it's only been 8 starts. Like, let's see him through a whole season. Let's see him versus all of the top defenses. It's not like Miami had this super elite defense. New Mexico didn't, right? So that's one thing. I think what you like about the guy is he takes care of the football. He avoids sacks. He extends plays with his feet. He's one of the most pressured quarterbacks in the country when he played last year, and yet the guy barely got sacked. He didn't go down. He extended plays, threw his receivers open. Maybe the next step for him, not just staying healthy, but maybe having more of a deep ball and better timing with his deep ball is sort of the thing that I've looked at last year, where there were times where he'd throw a little bit late. There'd be times where, he didn't quite get it on time. And certainly missing the spring and well, not missing, but being limited in the spring, I think could maybe hinder your progress and maybe makes it a little bit more rusty for you. So that will be the thing, is can he be on the right page with his receivers and build that chemistry with them where, on those deeper passes where the window's so thin, he's delivering it at the right time. He's got the arm strength, got all the skills. It's just a matter of doing it game after game and being consistent with it.
Well, I saw the comments you had a week or so ago about the timing with his receivers, and I know you said, small sample size, what you guys had been able to see, but is that, especially on the offense, like is that maybe one of the bigger questions that they have, exactly what they're going to get out of that group of receivers that they've got?
Yeah, I think really all the skill positions for A&M, there's a question mark. And, with receivers, the two questions are, one, it is a group that has dropped a lot of passes in camp and even last season. Guys like Ja'Day Walker had issues with drops. Cyrus Allen from Louisiana Tech had issues with it. And then I think, do they have a number one receiver? Mike Elko said on Monday they do, and that would be Noah Thomas. And he certainly has all the makings. He's 6'6". He can come down with all the 50-50 balls. He has pretty good chemistry with Conner Weigman from the games we've seen of them together. But he's had injury issues ever since high school. It's been a problem for him staying on the field. He played quite a few games last year, but he was hurt the entire season. Broke his pinky toe, preseason camp, had an abdominal injury that he was dealing with all season. And, I mean, that guy was nowhere close to being healthy. So it was kind of hard to judge him on that, on that scale. But they feel like he's the number one receiver. If there's anybody to really show up, I think it'd be him. Jahdae Walker's another guy who, at the end of last season, he really started to take over as the number 2 receiver behind Aniyah Smith. Evan Stewart kind of faded in the background while Jahdae had, probably 300 or 400 yards in the last 6 games and really started to take a step forward. Transferred from Grand Valley State. So last year was quite a bit of a transition for him. And so year 2, can he take an even bigger step? I think he can, but I don't know if he's a number 1 receiver, whereas I think Noah Thomas would be that guy for them.
Interesting. A lot of talk, of course, about the Mike Elko, Riley Leonard connection in this game. And I'm curious, again, from someone who sits there, like what impact you think that ultimately has in this game?
Yeah, it's funny. Mike Elko's, we asked about him, and he was like, yeah, it's interesting. It's weird. I don't want to do it. You could tell the mutual respect between those two
right
is high. And you could argue that without each other, they wouldn't be where they are right now.
Yeah, true.
Elko, Riley Leonard had a big reason in him having the success he did at Duke and getting this job. And with Elko, certainly had a big impact on Riley Leonard doing what he did. I think, it's interesting. You could look at it, Riley Leonard's going to know more about Mike Elko's defense than most college quarterbacks that Elko will face. But Elko is going to know more about Leonard than most coaches that Leonard will face. So both of them have their kind of own advantages. I tend to think that Elko will have the advantage because, he's the coach. He's the one calling the schemes. He's the one who's knows his strengths and weaknesses. Whereas Leonard, you think about it, right? When you're practicing during the season, you're not really going against your defense. You're going against the scout team defense that's sort of emulating what the opponent is going to be. So I don't know if it's totally fair to say like, oh, Riley Leonard went against Elko's defense every week, because really he's going against Louisville's defense. He's going against Florida State's defense. So I think that might be the one key distinction to make, and it's why I think Elko has the advantage over him. Now, is it a sizable advantage? I don't know. I tend to think, though, that I also think another advantage that Elko could have is, hey, he played Notre Dame last year. He saw what Mitchell Evans can do. He saw what Jaden Greathouse can do. He got to see this team up close. Now, some of those guys are gone, but a lot of the key guys on defense are back. And so I think that could be another added benefit for him.
So if you boil this thing down, do you think it's which quarterback plays better, which offensive line plays better, or something else that this game comes down to Saturday?
Yeah, the trenches will definitely play a big role in things. I think it might just be which offense does better, because we know both defenses are phenomenal. I think with Notre Dame, their offense looking better would look like their offensive line being better than people think, and
right.
being not looking like a team that has only 6 combined starts among their starting offensive line. That's how they win the games. It looks better than anticipated. A&M, I think it comes down to their skill positions. Can one of their receivers get 100 yards and really show up? Can Le'Veon Moss have a really impactful day on the ground? And if it's wet conditions, can he have, almost 100 yards on the ground. And then certainly A&M's defensive line will play a big role. If your defensive line gets 5 sacks in a game, it really doesn't matter what anyone else does. Like taking over up front, nothing else really matters, and that could certainly be in play for this Aggie defensive line. So I think it could all start with them for sure.
Carter Karels from Gigem247 covering Texas A&M football down there in College Station. Like you mentioned, he used to cover Notre Dame football recruiting back in the day. Not in the not too distant past. What, about 4 or 5 years ago? It's been something like that. Does that sound right?
Yep. Not long ago enough to where I remember covering Jack Kaiser. I remember covering Riley Mills and Howard Cross. Like I covered a lot of those guys on that team. So I'm trying to get together with Jack's dad actually this weekend. So, still have some relationships over there, and it's going to be great to see some people from Notre Dame.
It helps when Notre Dame has guys who have been here for 8 years, it feels like.
I know Jack Kaiser, he might be older than I am. My goodness.
I know. If he grew that beard out, like yours, that's all he needs at this point. All right. Well, enjoy the game Saturday, Carter. Appreciate you doing this. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Sean.
That is Carter Karels and Jesse Stiers sliding in right now. Things were, pardon the pun, getting a little salty there in the chat in the lead up while Carter was talking. We had some Texas A&M fans, salty, going at it. How you doing today, Jess?
Oh, it's been just another wonderful day in the land of Cleveland, but I'm excited to be on the show, to be honest with you. I feel like I've got some good whiteboard stuff. And I think it's going to play well off of some of the stuff that Carter Karels kind of got into. So I think the fans are ready. I'm ready. So
it's nearly whiteboard time. Just to answer a question, Josh Phillips was asking, didn't Carter used to write for Indy Insider? He did. South Bend Tribune /IndyInsider.com. They're basically one and the same. And that's Carter covered Notre Dame recruiting for a few years for the Tribune /Indy Insider. This is kind of an overlooked element to this weekend's game that maybe we get into a little bit more tomorrow, but the R.J. Oben, Mike Elko defensive connection. Everyone's talking about Riley Leonard and that connection to Mike Elko. But I think R.J. Oben, the fact that he's played in that defense, I wonder, kind of what kind of things maybe they're able to pick the brains of R.J. Oben defensively in this matchup. I don't think that's been really hit so far. But I tell you what, Jesse Stiers, let's just bring out that whiteboard. I think that people have been waiting for it. They've been, at some points, demanding it, if not completely demanding it. Oh, Gage, come on. Carter's not an idiot. Carter's a very sharp guy. Let's pump the brakes now. Come on.
Can you see this?
I can. I think that let me see. All right. So is this the first offensive play that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, this would be first offensive play. So kind of right now what you're looking at is 11 personnel. You have Bo Collins, which is, you can see I labeled them by number. So Bo Collins is number 5.
He's going to be the left.
Yeah, he's going to be the boundary wide receiver. This ball, we're looking at the ball on the left hash. So Bo Collins, number 5, is going to be into the boundary. And to the field side, we have slot number 1, Jaden Greathouse. And then the field side wide receiver is number 10, Chris Mitchell. And then right now we are in shotgun with Jeremiah Love also split out to the field side. And so I guess one of the first things that you'll see.
Okay, hold it. I just want to make sure now. Do we have Mitchell Evans on the field? This is 11 personnel, right? Is that Mitchell Evans attached there on the left side of the line?
That is correct. Mitchell Evans is attached here on the left side. It's really hard to make an 8. I'll try to make 2 of them. It is.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So,
yeah, Mitchell Evans will be number 88, and also into the boundary. And so in some regards, this is kind of what you would call a balanced look in terms of, receiving threats. You have two guys on each side, two guys in the boundary, two guys into the field side.
All right. And we've got, I think, a couple of keys potentially in this matchup, and I'll see kind of where you go with this. One is how much motion they're able to use, how much pre-snap motion with all the crowd noise and all that kind of stuff, but how they employ both the tight end, whether it's Mitchell Evans or Raritan or whoever it happens to be, and Jeremiah Love, I think specifically because of Love's versatility.
Yeah, so Jeremiah Love is going to be, he's going to be a center point in this game, in my opinion, because he is going to be able, to really give you kind of some unbalanced looks. Because if Jeremiah Love motions out of the backfield, that instantly is going to create, some stressors on the defense.
So give us an example of that.
Yeah, so immediately what, you could look at here, the reason why Mitchell Evans is placed here on the end line of scrimmage into the boundary is immediately he's going to provide an extra kind of layer or help for your starting left tackle who happens to be a true freshman, right? So what can you do in order to mitigate, that stress? Well, you can put an experienced tight end right next to him. And even if Mitchell Evans is running a route, he can chip this end man of the line of scrimmage. It can be almost a double team off the line of scrimmage. And then Mitchell Evans can either stay if it's a true run scheme, or he can release out and, run a route. But initially, he is going to get his hands on that end man of the line of scrimmage, right? He is going to at least give Anthony Knapp a second to breathe, right? To kind of get his bearings. I think that's going to be even more important the first series of the game while Knapp is getting his feet underneath of him.
Okay.
And so what you can do now is if you motion out Jeremiah Love to this field side, now you've created more so of an unbalanced look. Now you have three wide receivers to the field side, two wide receivers, into the boundary. But immediately what this is going to, motioning to the field side stresses the defense because it forces them, to stop the pass, to this side. And so they have to save defenders to cover, receivers to the field side. And so now you are a defender, maybe short into the boundary where a lot of these more kind of power run or, maybe counter schemes could happen with Riley Leonard. So when you create, this motion to the field side, you're putting a lot of stress on the defense because now they need to commit an extra defender to the run game. So that's, one of the first things that motion can do. And then the second thing that motion can do, and this is what we've talked about before, is it's going to give a tell, to what the defense is doing coverage-wise. Are they going to be more so in a man scheme? Are they going to be more so in a zone kind of scheme? And those are early indicators for Riley Leonard. And the earlier you motion out, the sooner, if Riley Leonard doesn't like what he's seeing, he can, audible in to something else. Maybe you motion Jeremiah Love out there, you don't like what you see, and you can still bring him back to the backfield, right? And so I think this gives, in a perfect world, in my opinion, you always have one or two, like multiple plays called based on what you see out of the defense, right? And so motion allows you, in my opinion, to get into statistically the better play, the play that's going to give you, that's going to have a higher success rate.
Now, I get the idea of having Mitchell Evans there attached next to Anthony Knapp as a first-time starter, and you talked about first series especially, kind of get feet under him and that kind of stuff. But how potentially, again, when you're talking about manipulating the box, whether it's 11 personnel, 10 personnel, whatever it happens to be, when you're talking about manipulating that box to try to open up the running game, what kind of looks do you think Mike Denbrock and Notre Dame might be looking at?
Yeah, I think when you're in terms of manipulating the box, kind of what I was just talking about here, you want to try to find a way to stress the defense more into pass, so they have to commit an extra defender to pass. And that's going to free up the box, especially on RPO looks, because these, RPO looks with someone like Riley Leonard, because these linebackers are going to have to honor the pass first and RPO. So not only are they going to be, more so on their heels and a less defender outside the box that has to defend the run. Well, one less defender in the box means that's one extra defender, or one less defender that, Riley Leonard and the offense would have to beat essentially in the run game. So I expect Notre Dame to be able to run the ball really well inside. I don't see them a lot of running outside, because I think that's where a lot of your kind of RPO and looks are like that are going to look. I think if they're going to run well, it's going to have to be between the tackles essentially, right? And I think that's going to be, via a lot of kind of Riley Leonard, maybe fake handoffs where he pulls it and is running, basically straight up the gut, because you're going to influence defenders to leave the box, get more horizontal, and that allows Riley Leonard to get vertical and go through the box essentially.
I mean, I think that is an area to look at as well, because I think that Notre Dame's interior linemen are especially like when you look at Ashton Craig at center and then Billy Schrouth on the right side, like those are the road grader kind of guys. And again, like listening to Carter, if there's I don't know that it's weakness, but if there's maybe a soft spot when you've got a defensive end moving inside, even as big as he is, he's moving inside to play defensive tackle. That feels like an area that Notre Dame should at least try to take advantage of Saturday night.
Oh, 100%. They need to, again, I would expect a lot of, if Riley Leonard's going to run the ball, I would expect it a lot of kind of, power schemes up the middle, where he might even be faking the ball to the running back. And that running back is now going to lead, or basically his role is going to be the lead blocker for Riley Leonard through the hole. He's going to, pick up the first guy that he sees. But again, the more you can influence the perimeter and get guys to commit to these, underneath shallow, quick RPO routes and get them to vacate the box, that allows,
right,
Riley Leonard to get vertical through the box right now. So I think that's a lot of what Mike Denbrock would try to scheme up essentially, because, Texas A&M is going to have athletes on the perimeters. Their defensive ends are going to be good. Their linebackers are going to be quick. I don't think Notre Dame should try to mess with outrunning teams, on the perimeter to the sideline, etc. I think they need to focus more on their power and being able to literally run right up the gut.
How much do you think that, would you stay in 11 personnel quite a bit in this game? Whether it's helping out with that inexperienced left side of the line, or, just with some of the other mismatches that you can cause, a manipulation and things like that with a bigger bodied tight end, to just moving Evans or, like I said, Raritan, whoever it happens to be, moving them around to different spots.
Yeah, I do think that 11 personnel is advantageous, because what you can do, let's say that, for example, they go towards, let me try to get this. Now let's say we split out Mitchell Evans. What you can do is, again, if you don't like that look, you could always motion down Mitchell Evans and allow him to attach to the line of scrimmage. So you can come out and show a more kind of spread out formation. And then again, if you're not getting the look that you like, you could always, bring Mitchell in and kind of put him as the end man on the line of scrimmage. But the reason why I think you always need some sort of tight end on the field, especially, again, we know that Marcus Freeman wants to control the ball, control the pace, and run the ball.
Control the line of scrimmage.
Running the ball and controlling the line of scrimmage is going to be, a staple of this game. So they can't just go empty or, spread everything out. They still need to be able to run between the hashes, essentially, right? And so how you're going to be able to achieve that with a young offensive line, especially at left tackle, is you're going to bring in someone, an extra big body like Mitchell Evans in 11 personnel and allow him to help out in the blocking game, specifically when you're running. I would imagine that in a lot of their run concepts this weekend, they will at least have one tight end on the field. But what you can also do, you can do things like sprint out or roll the pocket away from the left side, right? Like Riley Leonard can work over to the right, and that's just longer than that defensive end has to, basically cover more ground on the backside to get to Riley Leonard. So I would see a lot of that as well, kind of maybe, and that goes with the RPO looks, these kind of sprint out looks where the quarterback is literally taking the ball and he's immediately kind of, arcing out or sprinting out towards sideline to sideline, moving the pocket with him and getting the ball out quick.
And I know you've talked a lot about like Leonard being the guy running between the tackles and stuff like that. I mean, don't rule out either Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price being able to do some of that.
That's where Jadarian Price is really going to come into play, because I think Jeremiah Love is more of your kind of quicker, quick twitch perimeter type runner. And I think Jadarian Price, maybe even Aeneas Williams, are going to be your kind of heavy hitters between the tackles, essentially.
Love is rocked up a little bit though this fall. He's added some weight. So I mean, I'm not going to rule him out of being able to run and get some of those tough yards. Like I would still like, if it's in a situation where I've got to get those tough yards, I'm probably leaning a little bit more toward Price. We're going to see a lot of them, but I do think that Love can get some of that as well. I don't think they're like just going to limit Jeremiah Love to trying to, to run off tackle and that kind of thing. I think that they'll get him in the mix, and they'll see if he can get his nose a little bit bloody, I think, in there as well. All right, you got anything else on the Notre Dame offensive side of the ball, or you want to flip it over?
Yeah, I think this, to kind of end this, I think that there's a couple fun concepts that you could get into, passing wise, that would be very advantageous to Riley Leonard in the offense. Because I think at the end of the day, I think Mike Elko is going to err more so on going with a heavier box and making Riley Leonard prove that he can throw the ball, right? I think the more that Riley Leonard can throw the ball, the more that the box opens up and the run game opens up naturally. But I think they're going to err on Riley Leonard and Notre Dame as, the runners, and not necessarily Riley Leonard, the thrower. I think he's going to have to start burning them a little bit in the passing game for the running game to kind of open up a little bit.
Yeah. Craig's asking which back stays in for pass protection. Of the two, Jeremiah Love has been the one that Dealin McCullough has told us is pretty much up there toward the top of the list. And I think that Aeneas Williams is pretty good as well. But, that's one of those, like your prerequisites to getting on the field. You better have some pretty good pass protection skills. But in terms of who's the best, I'd probably say Jeremiah Love right now, which makes him even more valuable out there.
Oh, for sure. So a couple concepts out of this 11 personnel where, again, Bo Collins is still the wide receiver into the boundary. Attached to him, or the next guy, is Mitchell Evans. He's also the tight end into the boundary. And then you go to the field side, you have Jaden Greathouse, followed by Chris Mitchell all the way out on the edge. I think a fun concept to get into first is, using Chris Mitchell's speed to your advantage. So immediately what I would do, that's not what I would do.
I would run him off to the sideline.
Yeah.
Within a yard of the line of scrimmage. No, I don't think that's a good idea either.
Here we go. This one's going to be better. I would get Chris Mitchell vertical now. And the reason why I would do Chris Mitchell vertical now is because really that's going to probably take two defenders. You're probably going to take this corner is probably going to go with him. And knowing that Chris Mitchell has the speed that he does, I wouldn't doubt that this safety would kind of be more so kind of cheating over the top, right? To give this cornerback some sort of relief. And so what does that do immediately? Well, I think what you can do now is you can run, basically a flood concept, right? So Bo Collins kind of maybe runs, like a 10-yard underneath route. Mitchell Evans probably runs like a 5-yard underneath route. Jaden Greathouse is going to, basically replace Chris Mitchell and take this, underneath, I guess, zone that you would call it. And then, okay, how about we release Jeremiah Love out of the backfield too, right? So with everything crossing over the middle here, it becomes a nightmare of, who is this being passed off to? Because Chris Mitchell is, vacating the zone, getting 2 defenders probably out of the box right now, and say only one guy goes with them. Okay, let's take our shot with a one-on-one Chris Mitchell, blazing down the sideline essentially. So I like this concept a lot because, again, there's so many different, you're influencing so many different levels of the field right now. The linebackers have a lot to decide, between Greathouse, Love, and Mitchell coming across the middle. Oh, okay. Now you have, Bo Collins working at the second level at 10 yards. I just think someone has to naturally kind of come open in this concept, but it's led by using Chris Mitchell's speed to your advantage.
Yeah. And I think you can probably sub a guy like Jaden Harrison, for Mitchell at different points as well. Like when you talk about a couple of guys with high end speed who can potentially take the top off. Vince and I were talking yesterday, just looking at the depth chart. The guys who we thought were going to be the primary 6 in the rotation are the 6 in the rotation. I would put Jaden Harrison probably number 6 at the end of that rotation. But you've got Jordan Faison in there as well, and then Jaden Thomas. In addition to these 3 that we've got on the field, those would be the other 3 guys, who would be in there. So like you could see a potential of like, instead of Greathouse, maybe you've got Faison in the slot next to Mitchell, and then on the other side, well, maybe you flip Mitchell over to the other side, and then you've got Jaden Harrison out there as well. Like all speed, all good.
I think that's going to be the fun part of what they do this weekend is we're going to get a good idea of what certain wide receiver groupings mean in terms of kind of what kind of play they're going to be running on the field, right? Like I think you're going to have a more of a speed package. I think you're going to have more of like a short down. We need 3 to 4 yards. Let's put our big wide receivers out there to, shield these defensive backs, catch the ball, and bully their way down for 3 or 4 yards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like I asked Marcus Freeman kind of about planning for the unknown when you're going into an opener, there's always some uncertainty and unknowns. And on top of that, you're going up against a team with a new head coach. So that kind of adds a different layer to it. But at the same time, with Notre Dame, like there's a lot of the same. Like even though you've got the same head coach and the defense is primarily going to be the same, you've got a different offensive coordinator. Okay, Texas A&M can look and see what Mike Denbrock did at LSU, but then they can look and say, okay, we've got Riley Leonard. But now there are all these different skill pieces that Notre Dame had, and none of them were really the prominent guy last year. Some of it due to injuries, some of it due to mismanagement of the receiver room, some of it due to just attrition because Audric Estime's gone, and now you've got sort of more, like as great as Audric Estime was, you've got more explosive, more dynamic duo of running backs, and in Price and Love are going to be back there who can do multiple things as well. So there's really a good deal of unknown just in terms of exactly what A&M's going to see from Notre Dame's offense in this game as well.
For sure. Do you think we have time to go through one more passing concept?
Sure.
Here?
Let's do it.
Here's another one that I like. I think this is a lot of people I think it's called Dagger. What you're going to do here, the influential piece, in my opinion, becomes Mitchell Evans. He's going to basically release and run, like a 10-yard, what is it, like corner. I would say post or corner, or not post because post is going towards the goal post, but corner.
You always call the corners post for some reason.
Yeah.
You call them else. Yes, it's a corner route. Yes.
And then Bo Collins probably runs, like an 8-yard in route underneath this. So immediately, I like the matchup. You have to pick here. Is the extra defender, going to go with Mitchell Evans? And now you have, Mitchell Evans, a big tight end on a smaller safety, right? Now you have Bo Collins, sneaking underneath this. So if this defender kind of cheats this, if he's starting to, let me change the color here. If this, safety starts to kind of cheat up here a little bit because he sees Bo Collins breaking in, well, that just means, Mitchell Evans is kind of freeing up on this corner route, right? Mm-hmm. And then also what you can mix into this as well to really give them a hard time is, Jeremiah Love can sneak off down into the flat right here, right? And so now you've really put everyone in a bind, because is this linebacker, is he dropping in the hole and helping out on Bo Collins? Is he coming down on Jeremiah Love? If he comes down on Jeremiah Love, I like my odds of Jeremiah Love matched up one-on-one with a linebacker, right? But say he kind of, and then he starts, maybe cheating down here. Well, then you have Bo Collins sneaking in behind this on this underneath route. And I think also what you can do on the, the field side here is you have Chris Mitchell kind of, fake that streak that we just talked about and just run like a 10-yard curl, just putting his foot in the ground and come back. And you hope that, you've run this so many times at this point that, this guy is now flying out. Chris Mitchell puts on the brakes, and he's got a nice, easy kind of just 10-yard route right here. And then Jaden Greathouse kind of becomes the wild card, because you can either sneak him, kind of underneath on this out route and really put this defensive back in a bind, or you can kind of give him, this middle of the field sit down in the zone, because if this safety over here is
with that big body of his, especially.
Yeah. If you have, this safety, tracking with, Mitchell Evans, and this safety has shown that he's, basically going to help out on Chris Mitchell because of his speed. Well, now this allows Jaden Greathouse to really kind of have, not one-on-one with the linebacker, but all he's got to do is get behind this linebacker and sit down and just have enough time where Riley Leonard can get the ball over this linebacker's head, but drop it in underneath this defensive back that's probably reacting late towards the middle of the field.
Good stuff. A lot of possibilities with this offense.
Yeah, and again, I think it helps that they have a multitude of wide receivers, and like they talked about earlier, these wide receivers they want them to be able to play all of the positions. It's not about playing just slot, field, boundary. The more these guys can do, the more it allows them to open up offensively.
Yep. All right, let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. Colin Klein's offense that he brings with him from Kansas State University. And it's a very distinct offense, for one. And I am curious, Jesse, as distinct as it is, it relies on the quarterback to run quite a bit. And as Carter Karels was telling us, and, like you look at Conner Weigman's career rushing numbers, again, not a lot of games, 9 career games, 8 career starts, but only 160 rushing yards. He is more a true pro-style pocket passing quarterback. What's, how great a fit is that in Colin Klein's offense that he wants to run?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be the biggest, because what we're going to get into with these whiteboards is Colin. We're not going to get into really anything passing today, because I think Notre Dame's secondary is going to do more than enough to handle their passing game, right? I think what Notre Dame has to be worried about is Texas A&M's run game, and if Weigman is going to be able to run the ball, because looking at Colin Klein's offense at Kansas State, a running quarterback is very, very important in what he's trying to overall accomplish in the run game. And I think if you're the Texas A&M offense, you look at it on paper, you say, okay, Notre Dame's secondary, pretty solid, right? Notre Dame's linebackers, a ton of inexperience. So what can you do to influence these young linebackers in the run game and give them a fit, right? And that Notre Dame has really good interior defensive linemen. They're going to be pretty solid on the edge. So they're going to be able to create pressure at the end of the day, right? So I think being able to run the ball is going to be a very important aspect for Texas A&M in the game this weekend. If they cannot run the ball successfully, it is going to be a very, very long game for them. And I don't know that they'll be able to accomplish a lot offensively if they're not able to run the ball.
So, I mean, again, like you look at some of Kansas State's film, and like this was, Marcus Freeman interviewed Colin Klein a couple of years ago, and he's very 12 personnel heavy.
Very 12 personnel.
What's he trying to do with these run schemes that he has, and what makes it different from others that you've seen?
Yeah, so he wants to go heavy 12 personnel. And what 12 personnel is going to do is it's going to suck you into the box defensively, right? Like you have to honor two tight ends, these big tight ends on the field. So what he wants to do is he wants to suck you in, but he also still wants to he wants to suck you in, but he still wants to create an advantage on the perimeter with his blockers. He wants to have really at least two blockers on the perimeter in his run scheme. I would say he is a more perimeter run schemer than a guy that runs between the tackles. And so again, he wants to give you looks like it's going to be, basically an inside run. But then he's going to find a way to get these extra blockers on the perimeter, and it becomes a number game. He always has an extra hat for these defensive schemes when he gets out to the perimeter, meaning he's got probably three blockers on the edge to cover two defenders, right? And so all the quarterback has to do is get behind his blockers or the running back, and it's going to be a very, a really successful run.
Well, and like we did a few weeks ago, we found that play where his left tackle, remember, the left tackle faked a pull and then stayed put, and it led to a massive run off that side on just a little cut out of the backfield by the Kansas State running back.
So that's where it gets into, he plays a lot of eye candy with the linebackers, right? He shows you one kind of blocking scheme, but then he's, maybe bringing in a pulling tackle on the backside of it. So it's like, it's getting you have to, as a linebacker, you have to have so much discipline and just trust what you're seeing. Read that triangle in front of you. Read the guard center tackle in front of you, because it's always going to lead you to the right spot in this offense. You just have to stay true. While the play might be, seem like it's flowing one way, but maybe the guy in front of you isn't taking you that way. You just have to stay there and not get sucked up in the mess. You have to stay true to your eye discipline and what is happening in front of you. And so I have kind of.
Are you saying it puts the most stress on the linebackers?
100%. These young linebackers are going to be tested a lot this weekend because of, again, what he's going to do to kind of create confusion, for these linebackers in terms of their run fit reads.
All right. What do you got? Show us something here.
Yeah. So again, you brought up 12 personnel. Both of these plays I have is 12 personnel. So right now the ball is on the left hash. You have quarterback in shotgun. You have one wide receiver into the boundary. You have the running back split out into the boundary next to the quarterback. And then you have your two tight ends to the field side, again, 12 personnel. And then you have one extra wide receiver also to the field side. So with this play, I wanted to do this one kind of live because I think it's easier to kind of show you what I'm talking about in terms of wanting to get this defense, kind of sucked up into the middle here.
Okay.
So what they're going to do is let's just say you're this linebacker right here, the field side linebacker. On the snap of the ball.
So most likely you're Jack Kaiser.
You're Jack Kaiser. So right now, what you're taught as a linebacker, if this tackle blocks down, you as the linebacker have to fill into this gap immediately, right? That tight end is blocking down, the tackle is blocking down, the right guard is blocking down, the center is blocking down, and the left guard is blocking down. So right now, with everyone blocking down, you are inviting the defense to get sucked up into the middle here, right? Because that's what they're showing you. But what they're doing now on the backside is they're pulling this boundary left tackle. They're getting him off of the, onto the perimeter. And now this wing back or second tight end, he fakes like he's going to block down, but then he also steps out. So now you have two blockers on the perimeter, right? But at the same time, the quarterback is still faking this handoff inside. So they could still run this ball to the inside here, right? But that's likely not going to happen. This left tackle pulling is going to take you to the play majority of the time, right? So what happens here? Quarterback fakes this handoff. And so now everyone basically in this, box here is all sucked up into the run. This linebacker is sucked up in the run. And also, this is maybe some some Big 12 defenses, right? Like they're playing Oklahoma in this game, so don't take this too much because the discipline on Big 12 defenses isn't naturally great, right? But for some reason, this field side wide receiver, he's basically running a streak, and this safety goes with him and the corner. So now you've got another player outside of the box, right? So you have, when the quarterback pulls this ball, he's got two defenders on the perimeter here. He's following them. All this inside lead blocker has to do is wall off this safety or maybe linebacker, and now you got a free blocker in front of your quarterback who's now streaking down the boundary, right? Because of what did they do? He sucked you up inside with that down blocking. He fakes the inside run. Quarterback pulls it. Now you have an extra defender on the perimeter, basically leading a convoy of your quarterback into the field side here. So again, it's a hard concept to kind of defend when you're showing this, inside run. All the linebackers are committing to inside run, and now you have extra defenders on the edge leading your quarterback down the field essentially.
Which again, it's going to be really just that matchup is, to what degree is Weigman going to be able to pull that off?
Right, and that's why I said it's important, because this scheme only works if Weigman can fake the handoff, pull it, and then be able to be mobile enough to get behind these blockers on the perimeter.
Yeah, I don't think he's slow by any means, but at the same time, he's not Riley Leonard either, just in terms of how he's going to run. So,
and I think this is where it comes in this type of play. There's two players that really become influential to me: Jalen Sneed and Jaden Osbury. You need to have a guy that's got speed on the perimeter that can also make open field tackles. Like in a hypothetical world, JOK would be the best player to defend a play like this from a couple years ago, because of how well he is able to move in space and make, basically block to strut, get off a block, and make a tackle in open field. So it's going to be challenging. And again, this is what Colin Klein wants to do. He finds ways to get an advantage on the perimeter with extra blockers. He always has a hat for a hat at minimum, and likely he has an extra hat where that guy is just kind of a rover. He's picking up anyone that basically shows up that he can block.
So Anthony wants to know who's got outside contain on this play.
It's going to be a combination between your strong safety, your outside linebacker. So again, probably Jalen Sneed or Osbury, and someone, probably like, RJ Oben, Jordan Botello. Those are the guys that everyone just has to remain disciplined. You have to stay true to your keys, and you can't, what I would say is play, superhero football, right? Like, you need to do your job and not feel like you need to vacate your zone in order to go make a play. The defense is funneled for the play to go to whoever it's supposed to. You just need to do your job and stay true to it, I guess. And
okay,
I think Jalen Sneed and Osbury are going to have a hell of a game if they're able to kind of lock down these, perimeter runs, I would say.
Well, it feels like, obviously, if it's going to be a lot of 12 personnel, you're not going to see the nickel out there as much.
No.
You're going to see, more base defense, with the extra, like with whether it's Jalen Sneed or Jaden Osbury or whoever it happens to be out there as the rover. You're going to see more of that if it's that much predominant 12 personnel, which again has been what Colin Klein has done quite a bit of from his time at Kansas State. You got another one here to put up?
Yeah, this is my last one. I think I'm running out of wind here.
I put it in, you pulled it out.
Oh. This one is fun because, on this play, again, 12 personnel. Now this ball is on the right hash, and the two tight ends are to the field side on the left. And this was against TCU, I believe. And so you have 8 players in the box, right? And so what they're going to do on this scheme, I I got myself a little bit confused for a second because I put the running back on the wrong side. Let me put the running back on the right side, and this will all make sense. Why this is like, as a linebacker, I can only like this is what drives defensive coordinators crazy, because this is a hard thing to make. Like, you go through, as a linebacker, you go through the week looking at certain keys, and your coach is telling you, okay, when you see this is what you need to do. But what Colin Klein does is he goes against those natural tendencies that most probably linebackers are learning from. He gets you to break, your natural, I guess what you would say, rules.
The eye candy that you're talking about.
Yeah, the eye candy.
Movement just to get the linebacker's eyes moving that maybe doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it gets you off your own platform and moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it just takes one step in the wrong direction for these plays to break to the other direction, right? So I think this one is even crazier to me. So what's going to happen here is the left tackle, the left guard, the center, the right guard, and the right tackle are going to show what I would call Aussie scheme, or outside zone scheme, essentially, right? So they're all moving to the right here. The quarterback and the halfback are kind of moving to the right here. And so naturally, what does that do if you're a linebacker? You're not reading tight ends.
First step by the linebacker is going to be to the linebacker's left, with everybody moving, in that
right
direction.
With that outside Aussie scheme, these linebackers are moving this way, towards, like you were saying, they're going to be moving to their left, and downhill as quickly as possible, right? These defensive linemen, they're filling in here. They're filling in here. This linebacker is probably trying to come up and set the edge, right? Not let this right tackle get beyond him. And so, again, everything is moving to the left, right? So what does Colin Klein do? He sucks you up in one direction, and then he finds a way to get extra guys on the perimeter. So while everyone's showing this Aussie scheme, what do you think these two extra tight ends are doing? They're popping out here to the left. Quarterback fakes the Aussie handoff, and now he's got a convoy, because I counted literally 7 of these guys in the box all get sucked up by this Aussie scheme, right? So this first tight end, all he's got to do is wall off this linebacker, right? And now the quarterback is following the second tight end. All the second tight end's got to do is, devour undersized safety or defensive back, and the quarterback is off to the races. Everyone's got a hat. No one's got a hat for the quarterback. And again, this all comes from because they're showing Aussie one way, and then all of a sudden these 2 tight ends pop out and lead block on the perimeter, and it's off to the races for the quarterback.
So how are you avoiding that as a defense?
Watching lots of film, coming up with that's on Al Golden. That's not on me. He's got to have. I would have to probably.
Your natural instinct is what you just said. If they're all moving to their right, your first step is going to be to your left as one of those linebackers. So, like, are you pausing for a beat to make sure, where? I don't know.
It's hard.
It's not like Kansas State was, undefeated when Colin Klein was there, so it's not like it was an invincible system, but it's a very good system. Anthony, thanks for the super chat. He wants to know, do you think Notre Dame playing option teams helps against this kind of offense? It's not necessarily assignment football, right?
No, this isn't really assignment football. This has to do again with more so, I would say, in a lack of better terms, you're kind of breaking assignment football. You're kind of going against these natural tendencies of, maybe playing, you're so used to seeing this Aussie scheme. Here's what I'll say I think will be important if you're Notre Dame in this game. In this specific instance, the player that you would want to look at is the field side linebacker, because his job, he's not going to, if it's a true Aussie scheme, he's not going to be the guy flying over the top and likely making this tackle. His job is to stay on the back shoulder of the running back, play in phase with him, and if he sees him pull the ball, he's got to be that extra help defender kind of
Get
popping
outside.
out here. And now you have the number advantage again, right? Because they have two blockers. You have your linebacker, your defensive end, and then your extra secondary player. So technically between those, you have three guys for two. Someone should be able to get, to make the play, essentially. You have more numbers, right? So I think what it's going to take, and what I said kind of leading this off, it's going to put a lot of stress on these linebackers. They cannot overcommit, get overzealous, get overeager. They need to play kind of slow to go is what we used to call it, right? Like you're moving in phase slow, and then once you see who's got the ball, you got to go and make the play.
I'm going to ask you two parts here because Michael gave a simple answer, and I think there's some right and wrong to it potentially, but he says blitz. So my question is, one, how much does the unpredictability of Al Golden's blitzes counter some of this? But two, how much does, you guess and you blitz wrong, it can lead to a huge play.
That's where I was gonna kind of go with this. Is it's a double-edged sword, because if you blitz, if you blitz and blow up, basically that running back quarterback mesh point, right, where he's got to pull the ball and make a quick decision. That's the ideal circumstance. You get a blitzed untouched guy, and he's just blowing up the play in the backfield, right? But if that misses, well, now you've created a lane probably for the quarterback, and two, you've taken an extra hat out of the box that can help you kind of negate what we were just talking about, where they have enough of those lead blockers on the perimeter to have the number advantage, right? So if you blitz a guy, you're subtracting out. So you have to make sure that whatever you blitz, you get home. And I think some people are in the chat are kind of talking about, basically the defensive alignment. These are the alignments that TCU and Oklahoma went with. And again, I don't think Mike Denbrock and his defense is going to be a lot more sophisticated Al Golden, and come out and, probably have better defensive looks to, what Texas A&M is running. I'll give Al Golden credit that he's going to have probably a better scheme.
Right. Jesse basically set this up based on specific plays that he saw in real games.
Yeah, and credit to Klein because he took advantage of these
TCU, and the other one was Oklahoma. So
right,
yeah,
right. So again, I just like everything that comes with blitzing, it's got pros and cons. It's a double-edged sword. You better get home, or else you're going to create, an extra passing lane, running lane, whatever it might be. But I would anticipate someone like Al Golden doing stuff to kind of mix up the fronts to kind of get these offensive linemen and quarterbacks off of their reads, right? Like you don't want to just make it a bread and butter read and do exactly what the offense wants you to do. I think you can stunt and kind of create some confusion up front.
Right. That's going to be, like I said, it's not, like Colin Klein had some pretty good success at Kansas State over the last few years, but it's not like it's a completely invincible system. And Al Golden's defense being able to cause some confusion of its own, like knowing where the blocking assignment needs to be, I think that he can do a lot of that as well. And Howard Cross is really good off the snap of the ball, right in the middle of that line as well. I do know that. Jesse, some great stuff on the whiteboard. A fantastic kickoff to the 2024 season with the whiteboard.
I feel like my face is red because of lack of oxygen.
All that whiteboard talk, the chalk just blowing back in your face.
I guess so.
Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
All right. Scale of 1 to 10. How much differently do you feel about Notre Dame's quarterback situation heading into this year compared to heading into last year? And now you can use both positive and negative numbers on your scale of 1 to 10. So if you feel good, it's a positive number. If you feel negative, it's a negative number.
Yeah, so at the beginning of last season, we were all kind of scared about Sam Hartman playing in an offense that wasn't, prototypical to what he was running at Wake Forest, new offensive coordinator. I would say in comparison, I feel like a 6 out of 10 because I do still think like I feel more positive about the quarterback situation this year than I did last year. I think Riley Leonard, while he might not be, maybe as good as a passer as Sam Hartman yet, I still think he has incredible arm strength. I think with the proper kind of guidance and mentoring from, Gino Guidugli, Mike Denbrock, we're going to see kind of some passing unlocked between Riley Leonard. But again, the main thing that I like with Riley Leonard is the stress that he's going to put on the defense with his legs. He's not a one-dimensional quarterback. He doesn't need to rely solely on his run game. He can get into the RPO game. He can get into the quarterback counter game, quarterback power game. I just think that he provides another dimension to this offense where, again, you don't have to rely solely on the pass. And if the pass isn't working, things aren't ultimately going well. So that's why I have to say I'm more positive about the quarterback situation this year. And cherry on top, again, we can't forget that Riley Leonard was on a lot of people's big boards, before some of the injuries happened. Sam Hartman, not on a lot of people's big boards. So that's why I would say I'm more confident this season.
See, when I did this, what I was trying to do was put myself like, how did I actually feel a year ago? Obviously not knowing, a year ago that there was going to be Mike Denbrock and Riley Leonard here. You know what I'm saying? So it's like not trying to take myself out of knowing what the result of last year ended up being. How did I actually feel going in? So that's kind of where I'm putting it. Now, I do think you can separate it since we do have hindsight, being able to kind of look back on how things did work out. But my true number, just in comparison to where I was a year ago with Sam Hartman versus where I am right now with Riley Leonard, it's probably a 4. Like I feel a 4 better. Like I've seen a lot of, 9s and 10s and stuff like that. Now, again, we had a pretty inflated opinion of what the receivers were going to be last year. We've got a pretty inflated opinion of what they're going to be this year. But the biggest difference is you've got 3 guys who have transferred in who we expect to be able to make pretty immediate impact on this group. Not to mention you've got guys like Faison and, Greathouse and Thomas who are going to have their own impact. And then, like you mentioned, Riley Leonard's legs. I think looking back, like if I was just like knowing what I knew then versus knowing what I know now, it would probably, like, my number is up closer to a 7, because I think that the biggest thing with Sam Hartman wasn't coming out of that slow mesh offense and, coming into a more traditional pro offense and all those different things. I just feel like for a guy who had already played 5 years of college football, like he had reached his ceiling, like he had pretty much maxed out on his ceiling. There's still a ton of potential left.
I don't think we've
Riley
seen the
Leonard.
best version of Riley Leonard yet at quarterback.
Exactly. And when you combine that with a much, much different offensive coordinator and a much more imaginative offensive system and, all the experience that he's going to have with these wide receivers that Sam Hartman also didn't have last year, again, my number goes up knowing now what I didn't know then. My number is up to about a 7. That's how much better I feel going into this season with Riley Leonard.
Kind of the last thing I would say for this is, Riley Leonard's ability to run the ball also masks, maybe some of the deficiencies that you would see in the passing game, because the passing game doesn't become more crucial. There is more margin of error in terms of maybe the wide receiver doesn't run the most precise route, or maybe he's off his landmark by, a yard or 2. But again, with Riley Leonard's threat to run the ball, that also means that the DBs, the linebackers, are off their landmark by a step or 2, right? So I think it allows for more of a margin of error in the passing game.
Absolutely. Desmond Howard said today on ESPN that if Notre Dame beats Texas A&M this week, you can write them in ink to be in the college football playoff. Do you buy or sell that?
I buy that 100%, and I'm glad that Desmond Howard finally uttered some nice words about Notre Dame. But, I think at the national level, everyone's just writing off this schedule for Notre Dame. I'm not quite there yet, I'm always a guy, you got to wait for the season to play out to really understand how good these teams are. I mean, look at Georgia Tech and Florida State this past week. Like, everyone thought Florida State would be a sleeper. And I know some people are like, oh, well, I picked them to beat Florida State. Not a lot of people did. And Florida State was a lot better on paper. But what happened? Georgia Tech won. That's what you have to see. Some of these teams, like Louisville of last year, no one thought Louisville was going to be that great, right? Like maybe a person or two. But when you look at this schedule on paper, there's 3 games, in my opinion, that are super influential. Texas A&M, Florida State, USC. If Notre Dame wins against Texas A&M, I believe their bottom floor should only be 1 loss after that. And an 11-1 team, Notre Dame team, is getting into the playoffs no matter what. We know an undefeated team is getting in. I think if you go 10-2 somehow, that's where you're kind of 50-50 on whether or not Notre Dame is going to make it. But one of those 2 losses, I think, would come against Texas A&M. So if you take care of Texas A&M, I really only see a 1-loss team after that at worst.
I think so as well. Like, is Georgia Tech going to be better than we thought? I know a lot of people think Georgia Tech is going to be, as I said yesterday, I've been saying all along, don't overlook Georgia Tech. Like they were going to be better, Haynes King and the whole thing. But also, as I said yesterday, you're not just going to be able to play this, run control the clock running offense against Notre Dame. Haynes King, to beat Notre Dame, is going to have to make some throws. So, I mean, it'll still be, I think, a pretty well contested game, but I still think that Notre Dame has the edge in that game. But I think you're absolutely right. Like, you beat Texas A&M, the rest of your schedule absolutely lays out that worst case scenario, you've got 1 loss and you should make it in. But the other question mark is, a big question, I should say, a big question Marcus Freeman has to answer this season is, are these inexplicable losses, inexplicable performances a thing of the past? You had Marshall and Stanford in year 1. They got better as the season went on. It upped our expectations going into last year, but then you had Louisville and Clemson. Now, the common denominator is they're both on the road, and the toughest parts of your schedule, with the exception of USC, are either going to be in a neutral site, Georgia Tech, or home games, Louisville and Florida State, depending on what those teams end up being. But are they past the inexplicable losses? I think that's the biggest thing left for Marcus Freeman to prove in year 3. Can he have a team that's going to be favored to win most of the games that they play this season? Really, probably all but this opener, they're going to be favored the rest of the season. Can they win all those games? Can they handle their business week in and week out? I think that's the biggest thing that he has to answer this year. But I do think that Notre Dame will be in the playoff if they win this game. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Paul Feinbaum said today that he thinks Notre Dame will lose to the Aggies because of the A&M home field advantage and because Mike Elko has the upper hand because he knows Riley Leonard's shortcomings.
It's on brand. It's typical that Paul Feinbaum says this, because what does he do? He hypes up the SEC and he finds ways to belittle or cut down Notre Dame at the end of the day, right? I get there is some legitimacy to what he's saying, but Riley Leonard is the more experienced quarterback, and you could flip the coin and say, Riley Leonard has a good idea of the Mike Elko defense. He understands what they're trying to accomplish. I'm sure him and Mike Denbrock have talked about some of this stuff before. Is the home field going to play into it? Sure, but it's not going to play into it if Notre Dame comes out and kicks them in the throat and gets up 14-0, right? Like, you got to stun the crowd, take control, and be the team that's going to, basically, take charge of this thing, right? Like, there's no doubt that it's going to be a tough environment to play in. But I think Notre Dame has a better coaching staff. I think Notre Dame has more experience amongst their group of guys together. And I think they ultimately have more talent on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. It's just a matter if it can come together and they can play under composure. You can't tell me that the Texas A&M defense is going to be better than Notre Dame's and Al Golden's. And flip side, you could say Leonard and Weigman, worst case scenario, or a wash. But I'll take what Notre Dame has at the wide receiver, running back, and tight end room over whatever else Texas A&M has offensively.
It's a very SEC myopic statement by Paul Feinbaum, which is obviously not very surprising because he thinks that the SEC runs the world. Did home field advantage do anything for Texas A&M a couple of years ago when Appalachian State went in there and beat Texas A&M? No. And I mean, that was only a couple of years ago. That hasn't been that long. And there just as much talent in that, on that roster at Texas A&M as there is right now. So it didn't do A&M any, favors in that game. And in terms of, like the Elko advantage and all this stuff, look, he can know Riley Leonard's tendencies and he can design some things that he thinks will counter whatever Riley Leonard is going to do. But Mike Elko can't go out there on the field, he's still a first-year coach who's trying to go up against a former player. Riley Leonard is still going to make plays. Like Mike Elko is not going to stop everything just because there's some familiarity there.
The biggest difference in that, and I neglected to or kind of failed to say this as well, is there's a difference between Riley Leonard and whoever was the offensive coordinator at Duke last year and Riley Leonard and a Mike Denbrock offense. No one has seen that yet. No one knows what a Mike Denbrock offense designed around Riley Leonard and his skills looks like. So, again, until that's actually out there on full display, you can't tell me that Mike Elko knows exactly how Riley Leonard is going to be schemed, in this offense by Mike Denbrock. It's not going to look the same for whatever the Duke offensive coordinator was doing.
No, that's a great point. And even though Mike Elko coached against Notre Dame last year, he coached against Sam Hartman and a completely different offensive coordinator. And that's what I was saying earlier, a completely different set of personnel this year. I mean, right down to the offensive line. I mean, there's not going to be an offensive lineman starting for Notre Dame Saturday night that started against Duke at Duke when Mike Elko was the head coach there last year. And like you said, he's not gone up against Mike Denbrock, even though LSU and A&M are obviously now. Well, no, he wouldn't have even gone against Mike Denbrock when he was the defensive coordinator there before, because Denbrock was still at Cincinnati. So completely different set of circumstances. And I don't think there's any real advantage one way or the other. And again, I think maybe there's even more advantage because you can pick RJ Oben's brain a little bit, just in terms, Notre Dame defensive end who also transferred from Duke, pick his brain a little bit about Mike Elko's defense. And I don't think that's a huge advantage, but I think that there is some advantage to that. I did want to throw this one up. Scott said he's fired up for Saturday, and he hereby gives us permission to fill in any of the show's content with some of his 37 bold and optimistic predictions for the Notre Dame season on the boards right now. I think I remember seeing that headline right before the show started. I hadn't had a chance to look at that. That is on my list of things to look at. So we might be doing that. But speaking of the boards, K Shaw 12 recently had this on the Champions Lounge, and I thought this would be kind of a fun one heading into the season. He had a list of 5 questions that he put up there for Notre Dame fans. So number 1, who's the first Notre Dame player that you were a huge fan of?
I'd say a combination, Brady Quinn and Jeff Samardzija.
Really? That's not who I was expecting you to say. I thought you were going to say Manti because of your
but that was
connection. I guess that's
a different era. If you asked me kind of in that era,
one.
I would say Manti Te'o for sure. But when I first became a Notre Dame fan and started going to games, it's no doubt I love seeing Brady Quinn throw that deep ball to Jeff Samardzija.
Yep, you were probably king of the Samardzija fan club.
I had a jersey. I had a Samardzija jersey.
Yeah, between like football and going to all the Notre Dame baseball games and all that kind of stuff. That's true. I didn't think about that. I didn't think that far back for you. Mine's Rocket Ismail and Chris Zorich, both together on that 1988 team. Rocket basically the most electrifying athlete ever to suit up for Notre Dame. And I just love Chris Zorich, like a little bit undersized, but just chewing up the interior, playing nose guard for Notre Dame and just a key part of that national championship team in 1988. So those were the first two that I was a fan of. Question number 2. Where did question number 2 go? The question actually disappeared.
I have it if you want it.
Question 2? Yeah, the question disappeared from my list. So is it like your greatest early memory of Notre Dame football? Is that
what was your first big moment you remember from a Notre Dame game?
Okay. All right, go ahead.
I would say the Bush push is up there. And then, I always go back to this play, and I know it wasn't crazy, but Jeff Samardzija catching that pass against UCLA in the 2-minute drive to go on and win the game. I think it happened with like 10 seconds left in the game. Notre Dame was getting outplayed. UCLA was definitely the underdog, and I just remember sitting in the stands so mad and so sad because I was like, they're going to ruin this season to a team like UCLA, and somehow they whip off that drive. Jeff Samardzija breaks a tackle, and he goes in to win the game and score a touchdown. Yep,
that's absolutely right. Christopher Hardy says Catholics versus convicts, and that's where I'm going with mine. Now, this wasn't in person, and like this question didn't specify that it had to be in person. My most distinct, like big memory is Pat Terrell's pass breakup on the 2-point try against Miami at the end of the game to seal the win for Notre Dame in the Catholics versus convicts as they went on to win the 1988 national championship. Obviously, like those weren't my first like that season was not like the first thing I remember of Notre Dame football because I was a little bit older at that point. But basically, most of the 80s up until that point were very forgettable, and not nearly as many like actual memories in the moment during the 70s when I was younger watching Notre Dame football. Like I was very anti Joe Montana for a long time, if that tells you anything, because I remembered him more for who he was as a 49er than a Notre Dame quarterback. Who is your most underappreciated Notre Dame player of all time? I thought this was a little bit tough, personally, and you're speechless.
Yeah, I was accidentally on mute.
Oh, were you talking? I thought you were kind of doing an
What's yours? I kind of want to.
I went with Kavari Russell. I think underappreciated is hard, but I went with Kavari Russell because this was a converted high school running back who came in and started at cornerback as a freshman, and as a result, not all because of him, but if he doesn't play to the level that he played at, they don't end up going undefeated in the 2012 season and getting to the BCS championship game. But he was a freshman as a converted high school running back playing cornerback that season. So I went with Russell.
I really don't know. I wanted to say like Golden Tate because of he was an undersized wide receiver. He ended up going on to the NFL, but I don't think people realize in the moment, like how good of a like wide receiver he was. Like, yeah, he was good, but I don't think that they've had a Golden Tate, since then. But I don't really like my answer, to be honest with you. I just had to put someone out there.
I feel like he's pretty appreciated personally, but like I said, I think the underappreciated are harder ones. What one single play would you change from a past Notre Dame game?
I would have to go back to the Bush push game. I think that was, Notre Dame, had they won that game, it potentially goes on, Brady Quinn, Charlie Weiss are going to play for a national championship. So you can't really say that Notre Dame, like in the playoff appearances, against Alabama in the championship, they got crushed. They didn't really bode well against Clemson or Alabama. Like, you can't boil that down to say like one play kind of changed the outcome of the game.
I think you could, because my play is that same game. I'm going the Matt Leinart to Dwayne Jarrett pass.
Yeah, those are kind of like twofold in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, you could pick either one of those.
It was 4th and long, though. You know, if that pass isn't complete, it's game over right there. So I'm going Leinart to Jarrett.
And then I would say second would be the illegal pick play that was called against Florida State for personal reasons, because that was my freshman year of college. We were at a house party all watching this game together. I was like the singular Notre Dame fan in the room, and everyone knew it. And when Notre Dame got that playoff, the entire room went dead silent, and I freaking, went nuts. And then the play gets called back, and then everyone's looking at me like, oh, that, like, it's easy to make fun of the guy that literally just went nuts, because his team did something good.
Uh-huh.
And I think another one would be the last year against Ohio State, not handing the ball off to Estime on 2nd or 3rd down, and the ball that went through the defensive back's hands.
DJ Brown's hands.
I think those are also up there.
That's still a much tougher play than the still photo makes that look on the
oh yeah, and that's it. I think the photo makes it look like it's supposed to be this easy interception.
If that's Kyle Hamilton, it's easy, but it's not. It's DJ Brown. There's a few, and like you look at that photo, and his fingertips are barely touching that ball, and he is reaching up. Obviously, you intercept that pass, and it's game over. But still not an easy play by any means, even though the photo makes it look easy. Final question. Your Mount Rushmore of Notre Dame football. Who's on it?
Ooh.
I'll give you mine real quick. Newt Rockne, Joe Montana, Ara Parsegan, Rocket Ismail. That's my 4.
Brady Quinn, Manti Te'o, Jeff Samardzija, and I feel like I got to go with someone more.
So you're going
recent?
like all guys who are not 40 yet, basically, or right around 40? Is that?
Well, I'm going in my era too. I don't like to pick players that I didn't personally get to watch and kind of come up with and watch and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I could say Joe Montana, but I never saw him play quarterback for Notre Dame, right? If I had to go with one more after that, I honestly, I'm trying to think of someone. Oh, I know who I would say. I would say either Stephon Tuitt or I can't think of his name. He actually ended up passing away. Lewis Nix would also be up there for me as well. I think Golden Tate could be up there. Yeah, that's kind of like my group, I would say.
Okay. Interesting, very recent group that Jesse has on the Mount Rushmore of Notre Dame football, as if nothing happened before the year 2000. Basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still a good list.
That's a very Vince-like list, to be quite honest. Like, I feel Vince would cop out with a list like that. I don't want to think too far back. We can make fun of Vince because he's not going to be in until the end of the week now. So, all right, the NCAA, good answers, by the way, for the most part, till that last one. NCAA is giving serious consideration to eliminating the spring transfer portal and only having a December transfer portal window for college football. The portal would last 30 days in the winter. It would go into effect this year if they approve it. A subcommittee just passed it, and so they're looking at it. This year's window would open on December 9th, and it would close on January 7th. So do you buy or sell one portal window?
I buy it, and I don't have a lot of rationale to back it, but I think that here's what I think. With the current state of NIL and, the transfer portal, I think that there is nothing wrong to kind of holding these guys to a commitment of at least a year, right? Like, I don't like the idea of, because basically you have the second window for, maybe guys at the end of because the second one is like at the end of the spring, right? So you basically go through spring ball and a guy's like, I kind of, down the depth chart a little bit and he wants to leave. I think that you've made your commitment, and I think that you basically should kind of have to honor it for that full year. I don't think you should just be able to kind of get out of it
in the middle of the year.
Yeah, in the middle of the year. And I like, there's still to me something to, fighting your way up through a depth chart. Like, I think that should motivate you and kind of, inspire you to kind of work harder, because you're not necessarily seeing the immediate results that you want. And again, I don't know the implications of maybe, the recruiting and, the ins and out of the different aspects of it. But to me, I don't understand why there is multiple windows. So I think once you should make your decision, you should be set in that decision and kind of go through a full year before being able to decide, you know what, I think I'm going to transfer out now.
Yeah. So like Stymie and somebody else just said, Anthony basically saying the same thing, move the December back until after the playoffs if they have only one. The problem with that is the spring semester starts in the middle of January. So if the playoffs aren't going to be done until around that time. So you can't open the transfer portal in the middle of January because shocker, there's actually going to class that's part of the deal when it comes to college football, because I've seen some other people kind of say this as well. Like, you've got to have that. You've either got to do it one of two ways. You've either got to do it like they're going to do it in December and early January before the spring semester starts, or you do it all at the end of the spring. But obviously what that prohibits is guys getting on campus, getting with their new team, being able to go through spring practice with their new team and stuff like that. I hesitantly buy it. I can at least buy it until I see, what it looks like and what kind of impact. My initial reaction is I think that you're probably going to see greater numbers go into the portal in December, and, maybe they pull their name back out if they don't, find the destinations that they're looking for and stuff like that. But, if you're not going to do it at the end of the spring, like, what? I don't know. I guess the only option for these players who don't find a home right away in December is just to stay where you are. And obviously that's, kind of an awkward situation as well. I'm not completely opposed to the one window though, but I do still see some benefit to having the spring window, because then guys get to, you get to practice in the spring. You get to find out where you stand on the team. If things aren't where they need to be, then you enter the portal at that point. So maybe I'm selling, because I feel like you still need the spring portal. I think that like some people get anxious and you feel like, oh, we're going to lose more guys at the end of spring. And everybody thought that this year, and they didn't lose nearly as many as they thought they were going to, other than the punter. But I feel like you need to have that at the end of spring so that guys can kind of, find out where they are, like in the depth chart and that kind of thing in the spring, and then enter the portal if that's what they ultimately want to do. All right, Jess, we will end it with that. A lot of great stuff that we had tonight. Carter Karels, appreciated his input early in the show. Great whiteboard breakdowns from you, Jesse, as we get ready for this opener 4 days from now, Notre Dame and Texas A&M, Saturday nights, as we continue to count down. We've got more shows, of course, coming up over the course of the week. Our first countdown to kickoff will drop Friday. Don't forget, Fridays will not be a live show, but you'll be able to find it both on YouTube and on the podcast platforms Friday night as well. We're going to drop them Friday nights so everyone has a chance to listen to them. Maybe either, as you're going to the game, getting ready for the game, wherever it happens to be. Jesse, I will talk to you later. Thanks to everybody for being here. Don't forget to hit that like button before you leave. We do appreciate it, and it helps us out greatly. And we will talk to you tomorrow on Aggie Nation Sports Talk.